Welcome back to my series, GM's Guide to Running Kingmaker. In this episode, we're diving into parts 2 and 3 of Chapter 5, Cult of the Bloom, where the heroes must investigate a spreading curse and put a stop to it before it destroys the kingdom. If you want some extra experience points, here's an easy side quest. Hit that like button and leave me a comment and tell me where your Kingmaker game is, or what part you're looking forward to the most. Also share any questions you have about the rules, encounters, or topics that we cover today. And this is the obligatory warning about spoilers. This guide is intended for game masters and will contain full story spoilers for the Kingmaker adventure path. If you're planning to play in this campaign, or might be a player in the future, this is your cue to stop here and go stress test those dice, find the weak ones, and punish them appropriately. In part 1 of Chapter 5, the heroes received an invitation to participate in a hunting competition where they discovered some unusual monster activity near or within their kingdom in the Commonlands. Part 2, Full Bloom, kicks off as the heroes witness the curse in action, and then begin an investigation using the research subsystem to uncover the cause and source of the curse. Part 3, The Cradle of Lamashtu, outlines the final showdown with the Cult of Lamashtu at the site of a First World breach scar, where the barrier between the material plane and the First World is worn thin and realities are conflicting. When the heroes return to the lodge, this starts part 2. At the end of the celebration feast, one of the lodge's staff, a man named Timol, suddenly cries out and doubles over in pain, tearing off his shirt. And then, bloom-tainted plants burst from his body as a basilisk claws its way out and attacks. The next day, Anamede and the Eldori sisters quickly depart for their own homes. Jamel announces that he intends to put his plans for the lodge on hold and intends to use the Embeth travelers to investigate the cause of Timol's death, and urges the heroes to do the same. The remainder of this chapter focuses on the spreading curse, causing monsters to bloom from infected citizens and go on a rampage. In order to learn more about the curse, track down the cause, and find a way to put a stop to it, the heroes must investigate using the research subsystem. The research subsystem abstracts the act of investigating bloom sites, following up on rumors, and examining evidence. Rather than taking place in a single location, the heroes will need to investigate throughout the kingdom, traveling to attack sites, cult sites, or perhaps a library or academy if one exists in the kingdom. Looking at the Cult of the Bloom investigation block on page 230, it contains 5 different types of sites that the heroes can investigate at. To investigate a site, characters must travel to that location and spend a whole day performing the investigation activity, performing one of the listed research checks for that site. Each character can make a check, and their research points are cumulative. On a success, they gain 1 research point, 2 for a critical success, and they lose 1 point for a critical failure. The second part of the investigation block lists the thresholds. When the heroes earn enough research points equal to that threshold, they learn the information summarized in that threshold entry. For example, the first threshold for this investigation is 5 research points, at which point the heroes learn that the curse is spreading and more individuals have been bursting into strange vegetation and spawning a single powerful monster. They also hear rumors that a cult is responsible for this curse. When part 2 begins, only the Hunter's Lodge and the hunting grounds are available as research sites. Each day the heroes spend investigating, you will roll a flat check to see if another bloom event happens. The DC starts at 20, and each failure reduces the DC by 2, increasing the odds of another event. On a success, another event happens. There are 4 different types of events, listed on page 232. 3 of these will open up another research site. Tracking the investigation and travel time is important here, as kingdom turns will still need to happen, requiring a week of downtime for characters to be invested in their roles. To make up for not rolling flat checks during this period while the heroes are dealing with their kingdom duties, during the event phase, a bloom event will happen as an ongoing event. This is on top of rolling another random kingdom event. When an event happens, you can choose one of the random cult events on page 232, or roll for a random one. These events are treated as kingdom events to resolve, but do not trigger a kingdom turn. The first time each of these events occur, award the party 80 kingdom experience points, regardless of the result. There are two purposes for these events. First, after a cult event is resolved, it can open up a new research site for the characters to earn more research points. Secondly, to increase unrest in the kingdom and put pressure on the characters and build the tension of this threat. Here is a prep reference for this phase. I will put links in the description that go into more detail of the research system. I would encourage you to read through the research thresholds starting on page 230. These are not blocks you just read out loud to the players, rather summaries of the information obtained. Maybe take notes on how you want to present this information. You will want to be familiar with the random cult events listed on page 232. Rather than rolling events randomly, my suggestion is to pick the best one based on the current situation. As fun as rolling random tables can be, when the characters need new research site in order to progress and roll the public outburst event, it can just delay things. On the other hand, if they have multiple sites that have not been researched fully, adding more may be a bit overwhelming. Lastly, I would suggest coming up with a list of monsters to use in the too close to home and urban outbreak events. In the cases where you want to give characters a break from the research checks and give them something to fight, you should have a list of monsters that are party level +1 for too close to home and +2 for urban outbreak. You can make up your own table that you can roll on, or just have a list you can pick from. Having a prepared list will allow you to at least review the stat blocks for these monsters, so you were somewhat familiar with them ahead of time. Not everyone is a fan of the subsystems in Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Personally, once I got used to them, I found they worked fairly well. I will admit that this specific investigation is much more complicated, and due to the length, it may feel a bit repetitive to get through completely. One way to handle this is to loosen up the structure a bit and replace it narratively. Use the cult events either as kingdom events or as encounters, perhaps mixing them up. The cult activity event can be used to locate and maybe capture cultists that can be questioned and information could be gathered from them. If you start off using the research subsystem, but you feel your players are losing interest or feel that it's not fun, you can switch up at any time, even skip ahead. Priority here should be having fun, right? During this chapter, you will want to be aware of the sidebar on page 242, detailing the curse, Lamashtu's Bloom. This could provide details that the heroes could learn about the curse and the timeline of symptoms. You could also have a character or NPC become infected. However, I would advise using caution here, as the final stage of this curse is death, causing that creature to explode into first world plants and spawning a monster. While this could be a good way to increase the stakes and put some pressure on your characters, you want to make sure that you give them plenty of time to reach the cradle in part 3 and end the curse. Now, let's talk about the Goblin Village of Greengripe. This encounter area is covered from pages 232 to 237. I will not go through each area, but cover the highlights. First, let's talk about the situation in Greengripe. Greengripe is a sleepy goblin village that has been quietly thriving in the Sullen Hills for many years. The village sits atop a steep-sided mesa, surrounded by a 10-foot tall wooden palisade, with 2 watchtowers on either side of a wooden gate at the south end. The village is far from any trade routes or other village, forcing the goblins here to become self-sufficient. Recently, however, the Cult of the Bloom has sent a doppelganger priest of Lamashtu, named Verthad, to infiltrate the village while they laid false clues pointing to Greengripe, hoping to delay the heroes long enough for the curse to cascade out of control. Verthad managed to murder the goblins' leader and priest, Mugland, and replace him, staging an accident in Mugland's alchemical workshop to cover it up. They have been using Mugland's influence to manipulate the behavior of the goblins, to make it seem more suspicious should the heroes investigate. This includes building a greenhouse, which has been filled with exotic but otherwise harmless plants, meant to look similar to the first world plants associated with bloom events. They also had the goblins decorate the statue of Lamashtu with dirt at her feet and covered in tangles of vines from the first world, taken from the Cradle of Lamashtu. All of this is staged, intended to make the heroes think the source of the curse is this village, and hopefully make them believe that they have dealt with it long enough for the curse to reach the tipping point. Verthad, posing as Mugland, has also been warning the goblins that violent Longshanks will someday come and try to destroy the village. What they did not count on is that some goblins have become suspicious and wary of Mugland's sudden odd behavior, and are not eager to start a fight with the growing kingdom nearby. One such goblin is the war chanter Zangle, who has shared her fears with some of the other goblins. On page 85, in the hex entry, it lists the village as a landmark, meaning the characters can spot it without requiring a check from the next hex over, or once they enter this hex. Characters would easily note that due to the terrain and how the village sits atop a steep hill, there is no easy way to approach stealthily. As outlined in the sidebar on page 234, the intent of the Greengripe encounter is as a misdirection engineered to distract the heroes. Also to open up a new location where the characters can potentially learn more information. It specifically states that it is not the intent for the characters to open with violence against the goblins. Should it resort to violence, the sidebar also outlines that the first goblin warriors in the village will bravely rally to try and protect their home, while the non-warriors and young flee. After 10 goblins are slain, however, they will also flee into the woods. It should be quickly obvious to the characters as well that the goblins are much weaker and pose very little threat to them. As this is happening, Verthad will also attempt to slip away and return to the Cradle of Lamashtu. Should the heroes come and attempt diplomacy, they can talk their way into the village and investigate. See the Wary Guards entry on page 236. It will not be long, however, before Verthad catches wind of the visitors and tries to rally up goblins to attack. Should they be successful, it plays out in a similar fashion, with some goblins attacking. See Confronting the Priest entry on page 236. My suggestion for this encounter is to play up the fact that the goblins are trying to act brave, but are clearly fearful and wary of the characters. If the players do not immediately resort to threats and violence, have the goblins seem confused by this, and instead of taking them directly to the priest, have them sneak them to Zangle. Zangle can then tell the characters of her concerns. Tell them about the recent changes in Mugland's behavior, and concerns that he will lead them into conflict with the character's kingdom, but she is smart enough to realize this would end in disaster for her village. Regardless of which route the characters take, an investigation on the village should easily reveal that most of what looks suspicious was staged, and there is no real indication of a threat here. If Verthad was killed or escapes, the characters will need to resume the investigation and research checks in order to learn the location of the cult's base of operations. If the characters manage to capture Verthad, then it should be difficult but not impossible to obtain information about the true source and the location of the Cradle of Lamashtu. Here is a list of stat blocks to prep for this encounter. And here is a simple adversary roster for the village. This lists only the goblin warriors, those who will be armed and may stand and fight, should the characters attack, There are also many other non-combatant villagers present. In areas 4 and 6, the adventure advises 2d4 goblins are in these areas, but I would suggest to go ahead and use the maximum amount. These are creature level -1 and pose very little threat to the heroes, and just more of a distraction. Also keep in mind, per the Greengripe Enraged sidebar on page 234, the morale of the goblins break once about 10 of them are slain, causing them to drop their weapons and flee, or to outright surrender. By the time the heroes learn the location of the Cradle of Lamashtu, things will likely be pretty dire in the kingdom with growing unrest, and they will be eager to put an end to the curse. The Cradle of Lamashtu is located in the Selin Hills, in a hidden cave on the southern face of Tors in the foothills of the Tors of Levanese. If the heroes explore here before they have specific information, it takes a DC 30 perception check to spot the entrance, per the hex entry on page 85. I would suggest, however, to just have it impossible to spot without knowing exactly where to look, or moving it to another nearby hex. Here's the scenario for the Cradle of Lamashtu. Weeks before the heroes embarked on the hunting trip, a worshipper of Lamashtu named Derivian, following visions given to him in dreams, discovered a special cave in the Selin Hills. This special cave is the location of a First World scar, a place where the barriers between the First World and the material plane have been worn thin or torn by some powerful magic or erosion in the structure of reality. Previously, this scar was first discovered by a demonologist who tried to redirect the scar from the First World to the Abyss, resulting in a powerful backlash of magic, destroying the demonologist and infecting the breach scar, preventing it from healing on its own. Nearby, a wandering druid named Jin was communing with nature when he felt the disturbance of the scar. Jin attempted to heal the scar, but again, the same magical backlash dealt him a fatal blow. It was soon after this that Derivian discovered the scar and began harnessing the corrupted First World magical energy to develop the Bloom ritual. The cave itself is noticeably more warm and humid than it should be compared to the climate outside of the cave. Condensation constantly forms on the walls, causing water to pool on the floors, and multicolored mold grows on many of the surfaces of the cave. The air is thick and musty with an unpleasant scent of decaying plant matter. Any creature entering the cave must make a fortitude save to avoid being sickened by the foul smell. The caves are all dimly lit by phosphorescent fungi growing in the cave. Another prominent feature of the cave is that it exists in two realities at the same time. This is outlined in the Shifting Realities sidebar on page 239. While the characters are exploring the cave, this is a good opportunity to set the mood by describing how reality shifts. The ceiling of the cave suddenly becoming a strange sky, or the walls becoming a dense forest. Perhaps strange aberrations or fey monstrosities appear and attack the characters, only to disappear mid-fight or after a single round. Perhaps they appear to attack occultists mid-fight. Blocking off two important areas, 9 and 10 on the map, are walls created by Derivian using the Walls of Stone ritual to block access off to these areas. More information about these walls is located in the Bypassing Stone Walls sidebar on page 246. A perception check can reveal that the walls were created with magic, though they do not radiate magic themselves. If the heroes investigate the wall near Area 9, the ghost of the gnome druid Jin can appear and signal them to find a way through the wall. While outside of Area 9, the haunting only appears as a flickering, nearly completely transparent image of Jin, and can only beckon and gesture. Once inside Area 9, if the characters do not attack the ghost, Jin can be a great source of information, as well as a potential boon for any primal magic caster. by granting them 3 primal rituals in return for dealing with the Lamashtu's bloom, cleansing the corruption from the scar and allowing it to heal itself. Area 10 is where Derivian has been performing his ritual to empower the curse. As a result, this room is packed with vegetation from the First World. Thick clouds of mist obscure the cave roof and the tops of the strange plants growing here. The cavern is illuminated by a sickly yellow light, casting shadows and giving the illusion that this area is outdoors. When creatures enter this area, they must make another fortitude save to avoid being further sickened by the more concentrated odor in this cavern, which stacks with any sickness caused by the general odor of the cradle. The thick vegetation and swamp-like ground make this entire chamber difficult terrain. Nesting in this area is a mutated chimera named Akuzel, who will attack anyone except for Derivian who enters here. Once this chimera is defeated, like other cursed creatures, it causes another bloom. This one, however, manifests the bloom of Lamashtu. This corrupted plant is the result of many rituals and prayers by Derivian and his cultists. The bloom has consumed enough of the abyssal energies that defeating this final bloom monstrosity will allow the scar to start healing itself. Here is a list of stat blocks you will want to prep before this encounter. When the heroes discover the Cradle of Lamashtu, they should be around level 7, making the Bloom cultists and the Redcaps fairly weak opponents. Combining them with hazards, or in the fight with Derivian, however, can be useful to change the dynamic. You will also want to read up on the Lamashtu Bloom Curse. There are 2 pages listed here, as there are 2 versions listed in the book. The curse on the sidebar on page 242 is the curse that's spreading throughout Chapter 5. This is what the players or NPCs close to them may be exposed to. The second version is listed on the stat block for the final boss of Chapter 5, the Bloom of Lamashtu. This version of the curse has a tougher fortitude save, but takes longer for any effects to happen, and when the Bloom creature is defeated, the affliction is automatically removed. Be sure to study Derivian's stat block, as well as his tactics and taunts detailed on pages 243 and 244. Here is the default adversary roster for the Cradle. Depending on the time that the heroes choose to enter the cave, there could be some changes to this roster. Derivian gathers all of his cultists at the shrine in Area 5 to conduct a sermon every 3 days at midnight. This time is, of course, subject to GM discretion. Derivian may also be wandering through the caves, checking on his cultists' work. Or he could also be in Area 10, the garden, checking on the chimera. I would advise to use caution having the party face Derivian, the chimera, and the bloom all in one fight, as this would be a pretty deadly encounter. Lastly, if Verthad managed to escape Greengripe, make sure to add him in here somewhere. My suggestion would be the shrine in Area 5, or with the Redcaps in Area 8. My advice for this encounter is to have the characters face the cultists, but let them retreat and regroup if possible in Area 5. After a round or 2 of combat in Area 5, then you can bring in Derivian. The cultist should be a trivial challenge to a level 7 party, providing very little threat. When the fight against Derivian starts turning in the party's favor, have him use his magic Passwall spell, listed as Passwall in the stat block, to retreat and gather the Redcaps as reinforcements. And that wraps up this episode of GM's Guide to Running Kingmaker. If you found this helpful, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. I'd also love to hear from you in the comments. How did your table handle Chapter 5? Did your players love or hate the research subsystem? And how did they fare against Derivian and the Bloom of Lamashtu? In the next episode, I'll be diving into Chapter 6, the Varnhold vanishing, where the heroes must uncover what happened to the missing villagers, navigate tensions with the Gnomon centaurs, and face a terrifying new foe, a Cyclops Lich. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.